The consumer landscape is changing far, far faster than the actual healthcare, traditional healthcare system landscape. And unless there's some change from the healthcare system side, there's just going to be too much of a mismatch of expectations. And so these forces are really starting to kind of put interesting pressures, I think, for healthcare, which is, can it adopt fast enough to meet this now new consumer understanding of their own health and want for information and clarity?
New choices, new players, new models of care. Consumer-first healthcare is everywhere. For us to build the future, to see what's new, we gotta look at the world from a different point of view. Consumer innovation ain't going away. I say it's here to stay. Today it leads the way. We gotta drop the silos. We're all the same team. Experience, business, tech, and marketing. So join us now. Join the revolution. Consumer-first health is the evolution. Status quo, or like status no. Yeah, this is the healthcare rap. Yo, come on, let's go.
Welcome back to the leading podcast about consumer-centered healthcare. We're continuing to drive change at the intersection of traditional sick care and consumer-based well care. Our goal is to influence healthcare leaders to design products and services that are centered around what people actually need from their healthcare experience and to inform everyday consumers about those products and services. I'm Jared Johnson, and this is episode 440. Today we have the flavor of the week about the launch of Amazon Diagnostics in India. How will this new offering impact the home testing space when it launches in the US? And how can diagnostics in the broader longevity space alter the starting points of health journeys? I'll talk about that. Then Dr. Justin Norden, CEO of Qualified Health, returns to share highlights from the company's launch, where he's seeing generative AI deliver real ROI right now, and how leaders should be thinking about governance and safety, especially as policy is constantly changing. There's a lot to dig into here, so it's time for the awesomeness, y'all. Are you ready? Let's go.
Flavor of the week.
Amazon Diagnostics is here. Well, it actually isn't here. It launched in India in late June, but you can bet it'll make its way here shortly. On June 22nd, Amazon India unveiled Amazon Diagnostics, a new at-home diagnostics service that enables customers to book lab tests, schedule and track appointments, and access digital reports instantly from the Amazon app. The service, which is launched under Amazon Medical, aims to address critical challenges faced by India's diagnostics landscape. With Amazon Diagnostics, customers in 6 cities across 450 plus PIN codes can easily book from over 800 diagnostic tests, get doorstep sample collection in under 60 minutes, and digital reports in as little as 6 hours for routine tests. The service was developed in partnership with Orange Health Labs, a leading diagnostics provider. According to a press release, the launch of Amazon Diagnostics marks a significant milestone in the company's vision of building a fully integrated healthcare experience for its customers in India. This expansion strengthens the foundation of Amazon Medical by building on the existing service of pharmacy and clinic. Or as some evangelists have described it on social media, it's diagnostics done right. What's the consumer lens here? Let's take a quick step back. When Amazon's offering makes its way to America, which it's only a matter of time, it will join an exploding space. Consumers have more options than ever for advanced blood testing, identifying biomarkers, and proactive health planning. Yeah, that's right, you heard it. Proactive health planning, y'all. Some of these services are one-offs for those who are more self-directed. Think Everlywell or Mito Health, while many others are components of longevity medicine services. Players like Function Health, Superpower, Inside Tracker, SciFox Health, and Life Force for starters. Longevity medicine is one of the most consumer-directed types of health. Most offerings seem to include a diagnostics component plus a combination of membership-based coaching and apps so you can understand your numbers and plan how to act on them. I think this space will go through some growing pains as it discovers that a majority of consumers, even those who are interested in better understanding their health, still act with trepidation and hesitation when it comes to their health data. A quick teaser, you'll hear more about consumers' hesitation in a few weeks in our interview with OnMed CEO, Karthik Ganesh. But coming back to longevity medicine, I also think it's pretty safe to say that Amazon joining the fray will bring more visibility to the space and accelerate the conversation. So bring it on, I say, because if longevity medicine is a true unlock for consumer health, and if Amazon Diagnostics wants to play a role domestically, we're going to be talking about a very different starting point for health in the near future. Let's pay attention when Amazon Diagnostics comes to the US and becomes one of the biggest players to alter the starting point of health journeys. That's another way that we'll build the healthcare of tomorrow, and that's the flavor of the week. Hey y'all, I'm here with Jessica Holton, co-founder of Ours Privacy. Jessica, how do health systems know how much marketing data to track?
Know what you're optimizing for. We see and hear about a lot of teams that are tracking everything they possibly can, which you would think is more info is better, and we can make more decisions if we have more information. But actually, it just sends more data that is potentially PHI, and you have less control over it when you're tracking everything. Instead, choose 1 to 2 key metrics that you are tracking and focus on those metrics.
Thanks, Jessica. Visit oursprivacy.com for more information and tell them you heard about it on the Healthcare Wrap.
Healthcare Wrap is sponsored by Cyril. Whether you're trying to drive patient volume as a healthcare provider, boost membership enrollment as a health insurer, drive improved adherence rates in pharma, or deepen strategic B2B partnerships throughout the healthcare ecosystem, Cyril can help you with your go-to-market efforts and growth targets, enabling you to reach the clinical and financial goals of your healthcare organization. For more information, go to Cyril.com. That's CYRALL.com.
All right, let's get into the flow. Please join me in welcoming our guest this week. Dr. Justin Norden's back. Dr. Norden is now the CEO of Qualified Health. Last time we had him on in 2023, this new venture was kind of in the background or getting ready to launch. And so I'm really excited to welcome him back and here now that everything's kind of pumped and out there and has serious momentum behind it. Justin, welcome back.
Jared, thanks so much for having me. And yes, a few things have changed since last time.
Let's start with that. So you last appeared here on the podcast. It was August 2023. And like we said, there's a few things have happened since then, including the launch of Qualified Health. Maybe you can give us some brief highlights, where you've been since then. And why don't you share a little bit more about Qualified Health for those who aren't as familiar?
Yeah. And actually, I'll go a little bit farther back, actually, which provides a little bit more context. But when I spoke with you last, I was a partner at GSR Ventures. I was doing early stage investing in healthcare. I was also on faculty at Stanford, where I've been teaching on digital health and generative AI in medicine. But before that, I actually was CEO and founder of a company called Trustworthy AI, where I had this thought process of, if we're ever going to actually use AI for clinical care, for things with lives at stake, we need to know the performance, safety, and ultimately trust these systems. Doctors are risk averse, healthcare is risk averse for good reason. And so I thought we'd really need to cross that barrier. What I found at the time when founding that company in 2017, 2018 is literally no one cared. It was too soon. It was too soon for AI to be deployed at scale, people to be really thinking about these performance, evaluation, trust issues. And long story short, with the company, we were very fortunate to pivot to the autonomous vehicle sector and ultimately sell that company to Waymo, Google's self-driving car company, where it's part of safety simulation evaluation infrastructure. And I will argue actually the cutting edge of where AI is being applied with lives at stake. Now it has really grown since then, where Waymo is, many fully autonomous drive all across the country. Coming back to 2023, when we spoke last, obviously the healthcare world had a very different perspective on AI. This is now post ChatGPT launched, the fastest growing application in history. And all of a sudden, healthcare leaders and people across the country, were starting to call me, hey, Justin, you're Stanford faculty who teaches the course on Gen AI in medicine. What's happening? What is this new tool? Where can we use it? And after many conversations like that with healthcare leaders, boards, companies, et cetera, realized I had unfinished business from before on trying to really get these tools adopted and show that they're safe so that they can really drive use. And then I decided to start a Qualified Health, where that was the goal of the company. And so what exactly are we doing? We partner with health systems as an infrastructure partner to help them build, test, deploy, monitor, and really govern AI systems at scale. And so we spoke, now we're almost 50 people working with healthcare systems all across the country, and just really as a partner to how do we deploy these generative AI solutions safely.
That's just a microcosm of not only this side of healthcare, but where things are converging, where they're going. And that does bring about, so much noise around AI in healthcare. That's still part of the deal, I guess. That's part of the reality. A lot of noise. So, separate that from the signal is an important piece here. Where are you actually seeing AI deliver real ROI? That could be generative AI or just in general. Like, what areas are you seeing some ROI right now?
I'll split into two parts. The most adopted, I would say, AI or generative AI tool across health systems today is ambient documentation. There was a huge provider need. People were burned out. This solution helps not all, but many providers, and people love it. And some 40% of systems across the country, from some of the data I've seen, are in some process of testing, piloting, or kind of scaling the solution. What has been harder or more mixed is actually the ROI question that you ask. Physicians are liking this tool. Are they necessarily seeing more patients? How much time is it saving? Is it making the CFOs happy yet? A little bit more mixed at health systems, or many, and actually a Peterson report came out a few months ago that more or less said no, kind of across a consensus answer. Yet people still love it. Eventually, will that lead to increased physician retention or other metrics? Probably yes, but it's a little bit softer maybe than many would hoped. Where is their ROI today? People looking in CDI or revenue cycle management, as well as some cases call center. This is where there is real hard dollar, either replacement in some sense from call centers, from staffing, or in revenue cycle from kind of found revenue and opportunities where health systems have missed from a billing, from a denials management perspective. This is starting to drive real ROI for health systems today.
It is all just converging. It's all happening all at the same time when we're talking about these. I guess that brings to mind this thought of where some of the real challenges are here. I kind of mentioned the hype or the excitement around it. And I've heard you say you believe the real challenge here isn't the excitement, it's clarity. So it's an understanding here. So I'm just wondering what some of the biggest missteps are that you see healthcare organizations making right now when they're trying to scale these solutions and just figure out more of their own runway. But what are some of the biggest missteps you're seeing right now?
We're almost halfway through 2025. It's been over 2.5 years now since ChatGPT launched, and kind of the world turned its attention, as well as healthcare leaders starting to say, hey, how do we start to use these tools for us? And what's maybe somewhat troubling or not with that is we aren't here talking about the raving success stories across multiple different areas where health systems have changed, work has changed, healthcare is better for physicians, consumers. Not that much has changed is the short version, which as a betting person over the last decades in healthcare, how much has technology changed healthcare? Not that much. And yet there's a slight, I would say, changing belief that we're seeing this technology start to change things outside of healthcare. We're seeing the capabilities. And so it probably should. And so 2.5 years from now, will it be different or won't it be different? And my hope is that it really is. What's missing with that? To get the change that we want, it really takes top-down leadership alignment that these changes need to happen, and real clarity of focus for what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. And so what do I mean by that? What has happened, I would say, largely over the past couple of years is lots of excitement, lots of small pilots, internal builds, small partnerships, showing a proof of concept without having vision to the end of what does scaling this look like when we see it works? How will we know it's working as intended? We now have non-deterministic AI systems. How will we test to make sure these things are working? And what's needed to really drive this is you have to have the end to end in mind from the start. What are we doing? What use cases are we selecting? And where are they going to drive real tangible value, as well as where is it not too risky? And where is it going to fit for the solution? Step one. Step two, where are we going to deploy this and how are we going to know it's good enough to make sure that's working? How are we going to manage the change management of a workflow that maybe used to exist but now should change based on the use of these tools? How are we going to track this and keep the audit trail to make sure this is working? And how does this fit in our broader AI governance policy? Until we do all of those things and have the goal in mind from the start, we get stuck on pilots and go forward and backward. So actually, one of the people we work with, Eric Larson from formerly Advisory Board and Towerbrook Advisors, talks about pilots are shrinking in 2025 as people are realizing, oops, I didn't have these end goals in mind, and people are moving away from, in fact, many AI solutions. And so it is really clarity of focus of what are we prioritizing and how do we get this to the finish line? That's what it's going to take for leaders 2.5 years from now to say, hey, our organizations are in a different place. And what's exciting to me is we're starting to see that happen. We're starting to see real top-down leadership for this is a priority for us and for our organization. And we're seeing real clarity on these are the things we're going to start to target first to really make a difference.
That's clarity indeed. It really is, because all the things that you're able to see and just validate, this is blocking the conversation. That part of the conversation, the landscape is changing so fast, right? So for leaders to be able to understand where to plug in, it felt like there always used to be sources we could trust. There were fewer sources out there to validate, hey, this is a new direction, or this investment's worth it for us. And now the pace is so different. Maybe I can throw this put the consumer lens around that, right? And put that front and center. Because for the typical person who is engaging with healthcare, seeing a clinician, being treated, being in contact with their clinical team, I've always gotten the sense that most of them have no idea. They know things are complex. They know it's complicated to provide the care, but they don't know how or why. And in a lot of ways, there's just make it easy for me. And we're like, no, it's helpful for you to know a little bit about why it is complex now and what we're trying to do to fix it. And sometimes that conversation goes somewhere, and sometimes it's helpful. And sometimes it helps them understand a little bit, here are the parts we are trying to make easier or less frustrating. And then we enter AI into this whole conversation, and we're like, it can either make that conversation easier and more transparent, or they're still just going to be like, look, whatever you're doing, just make it easier for me. So that perspective is still, that voice of health consumers is still very useful in my mind to be a part of any conversation, because when you keep asking, hey, what's the why behind this? And take something like ambient documentation. What's the why behind this? Yes, let's reduce the administrative burden. Let's improve the clinical workflow, the patient experience. Okay, cool. Hey, why do I want to do that? You keep asking why. You're like, wait, what does it get back to? And it does get back to all the aims of the quadruple aim, quintuple aim. Let's make this easier for everybody. If you had to summarize it in a lot of ways. So if we put that consumer lens front and center here, then we're talking about how AI is making healthcare ideally easier or less frustrating for the people who are being cared for. So patients and consumers and their families, and their loved ones, their caretakers, their caregivers. Are there use cases where you're seeing that with AI right now? I'm just curious.
What is interesting is the consumer experience to get information on healthcare has changed a lot in the past 2.5 years. And yet the actual health system experience hasn't changed too much, maybe except for that ambient documentation that you're talking about. But what is different for consumers today? Consumers are replacing their prior Google search with now a ChatGPT or Perplexity or now Gemini-powered Google search to get access to their own information. And so people talk about this democratization of knowledge generally, and it is absolutely happening in terms of healthcare. I've heard wildly different estimates from how much of the query volume at OpenAI is health related. And the short version is it's massive. I do it too. I know my students do it. I know people, everyone I work with, many other doctors will still use one of these tools as a first check for information or something else like open evidence. And so these tools, people are replacing how they used to retrieve information with now AI searches from a consumer perspective. And people are empowering themselves in a completely different way from the knowledge to understand this. And then one of the things you mentioned of the complexity of medicine and explaining all the terms, the jargon, that is one of the best ways to use AI is to reduce or change the complexity at how something is explained. Hey, take this medical document I got, explain it to me like I'm an 8th grader. Actually, no, explain it to me like I'm 8. And all of a sudden, patients are learning so much more about their conditions and really being empowered with this information. Or another way, I know many patients are starting to use these tools is as a second opinion. Hey, can you explain this to me? I'm not sure about this. Give me some more context or understanding here. And so that is happening today. That is fundamentally different and will only accelerate from here. There's another dimension which is coming into play also of a handful of startups trying to say, hey, rather than just allowing patients to ask questions, let's give them even more data, whether that's imaging data on their own bodies or blood test data on their own bodies. And this is definitely driving many questions across medical community of all of a sudden now patients are going to have access to AI tools to ask questions about their own health and even have data that they might not even have access to from the health system. And so the consumer landscape is changing far, far faster than the actual healthcare, traditional healthcare system landscape. And unless there's some change from the healthcare system side, there's just going to be too much of a mismatch of expectations. And so these forces are really starting to kind of put interesting pressures, I think, for healthcare, which is, can it adopt fast enough to meet this now new consumer understanding of their own health and want for information and clarity?
Fascinating. Okay, so let's add another layer here then, if you will. We're still focused on the consumer side, right? There's this fact that the current administration in Washington has a more, you could say, a more defined perspective, consumers and their health. I think it's fair to say very recently there's different, or at least a more defined point of view here. Any comments on how that impacts the way that consumers understand their health, the way you're just talking about some of these new technologies that are available to them now?
It's clear the current administration is looking to empower consumers. From RFK down, that seems like the clear mandate, and from many of the discussions from ourselves and others, that empowering consumers to kind of be in charge of their own health, and specifically their own health data, has been a focus around this. Right now, data and who owns data has been an age-old, almost like joke or horror story, depending on how you want to describe it, of healthcare. Is it the patient own their data? Well, they can't actually get access to it because it comes on a CD-ROM or a fax, from a dark dungeon that's always busy 2 months later. And despite the no information blocking and transparency, it has been difficult. And that is a clear priority of the current administration, which is how can we really give access to patients to have their own data so that they can take it on a QR code from one visit to the next, have it be updated, is a real priority. And if you have that, that is what allows these AI systems to make much more educated conversations or kind of requests if all that data is actually available. And so that's what's interesting to me, is you put real data availability for someone's own health information with AI side by side. A consumer is going to go through so many more cycles of learning and understanding about their own conditions.
And that's probably not going to take too long to get here, right?
Policy changes and health systems responding, those things always do take time. The AI technology will be here. How quickly that data is opened up, I don't have any strong bets to make, but it will be here, and this administration is certainly trying to move fast.
Kind of coming back to the governance and safety side of things, how do you think leaders should be thinking about that today? I would definitely say they have more information now, but I don't know otherwise, especially so the tech is evolving so much faster than most organizations can create those policies. So what's your advice there?
What's changed from last week, 18 months ago? I would say people know this is an issue, top of mind. Many health systems across this country have now stood up a governance committee, as they know that's going to be important with AI, and are starting to meet to start to hash things out. What's missing is, I would say, most of those committees are operating off of a Excel spreadsheet for data. Nothing is real time, and state of the art is probably a PDF document of these are the policies of do's and don'ts across an organization. And it is the right first step, and that's great. But how do you build governance into the technology and the tools you're giving? That's really where the field needs to go. One of the things we do with our health system partners is, we give access to state of the art models to all of their employees, which maybe seems scary, how you have 15 or 50,000 people starting to use these AI tools. But the reason to do that is you're not leaking out PII and PHI, which is happening across the country. Despite health systems trying to block this, people will just go to their personal devices because that's what they use at home. People are starting to use these AI tools in their own personal lives. And so you need to be proactive about governance, which is how do you give safe access? And then the second piece of that, if you're working together to give your own employees access, you can start to educate and train and mitigate against those potential risks or ways you don't want your employees to be using these tools. And so that's really what needs to come next. It's not enough to have the committee and the PDF document. It's how are we putting this into practice, being able to show what good looks like, be able to track what good looks like, and really start to educate and upskill an entire workforce to using these tools. So we've done, I think, as a field, steps 1 and steps 2. It's really how do we move forward towards an AI literate and an AI forward organization. And you have to have governance built in from a technological perspective as well.
It is. It's interesting how quickly it's evolved here. In the next 12 to 24 months, for instance, is there something in there? Like, is there maybe even one AI-powered experience in healthcare that you think will be normalized at that point that isn't right now?
In the next 12 to 24 months, more and more patients are going to go to these AI tools as their first answer, first search for information. It's already a significant number, and it's only going to grow, so that I would bet most patient journeys will start with an AI-powered question of understanding their own health information. That will happen over the next 12 to 24 months. The second thing that will happen is the health systems who are investing now and starting to use these tools will start to have very significant kind of ROI changes that are starting to impact their bottom lines and how they're able to deliver care, how much care they're able to deliver. And the ROI conversation in 18 months isn't going to be, we're kind of seeing this or that on ambient documentation. It's going to be fundamentally changing how certain organizations start to do business. It won't be all of them. There'll be many health systems who are going to be watching and waiting, but the ones who lean in are going to start to see their organizations change.
How does that all wrap up for you? How do you feel about the future? Do you have hope? What in particular gives you that hope?
As kind of a computer scientist and physician by background what has driven me crazy is the fact for how much we know in medicine and healthcare for what's right, how to help people, and just this giant gap between what people get. And so what I'm very hopeful for over the next 2-5 years is that is going to shrink a ton because it's no longer going to be gated knowledge in the hands of the medical community. Patients are going to be able to bring that knowledge. We're going to be able to be much more proactive with our patients, and that gap is going to shrink. And these tools really do have the power already today. Forget the fact that the models keep getting better every few months, if not every few weeks. There's really going to be a raise in literacy among people's own healthcare information. And with that, a raising the bar of the basics for healthcare. That technology is capable today. It is going to happen. And it really should raise the bar across the country for people being able to take advantage of that information to really improve their own health.
What a vision you've painted here, and what a point of view that has been super valuable for us. I want to thank you for joining us today. And thanks, Justin, for everything you're doing to make healthcare more consumer-centered. I'm excited for what the future is bringing as well.
Jared, thanks for having me.